And I just want to say thanks for coming. We're really, really glad you're here. And I want to thank Warren. Thank you, Warren, for pointing us to the glory of God this morning. And boy, that's a great reminder, very convicting. And really, what my goal is yesterday and today is just to really point us to the glory of God, the greatness of God, God in all of His care for us, His protection, the way He provides for us. And that's what I want to take you to again today. As I said yesterday, I think oftentimes these ideas of fear, of anxiety, of concern as to how is it going to go for me, what will people think or say, will I be able to do it, will I be able to raise the support, all those kinds of questions kind of come like a flood sometimes and overwhelm us to a point where we become paralyzed. It becomes very difficult to make decisions. And I think sometimes we ask the question, why? Why me? Why would I respond to the call like that? And I would like to just encourage you to turn that on its head too and just ask the question, why not? Why not? And so this morning, as I talk a little bit more about how God worked in our situation, provided for our needs, and protected us through some pretty harrowing times, I want you to just really think about that in your own life and how God could, He could do that for you too. Now, do we have a PowerPoint up this morning, or are we having trouble? Same one as last night, yeah. And I might have to go ahead a little bit on that one. But so last night I finished up with just thinking about a little bit about risk and what does that look like, for you, for us. Yes, that's the slide I wanted right there. Perfect, Morgan, thank you. When our focus is on God's purpose over our plans, we are freed from the pressure that our little plans, our little things create. We are often freed from the paralysis of what I call indecision. We know what God's purposes are, right? In terms of, especially what we're talking about this weekend, we know what God's purposes are. God's purposes are for all of us to respond to the Great Commission and take the gospel to the world, to the nations. That is His purpose for our lives. And so I've always contended, as I said last night, I would always encourage people to plan to go, but be willing to stay. To position yourself as followers of Jesus. Those of you who have grown up in Christian homes, been exposed to missions all your life, go to Christian colleges, you're in that space. Place yourselves, position yourselves in such a way, in such a stance, that you are preparing yourself to respond to the call that's been given to every single believer in Jesus Christ. So, how many of you have heard of the student volunteer movement that took place back in the late 1800s into the early 1900s? Okay, some of you have. So just for a context, that took place over the course of about 40 years. During that 40 years, 20,000 long-term cross-cultural missionaries from America were launched into all kinds of unreached parts of the world. During that time frame, about 40 years, 1 out of every 37 college students surrendered and prepared to go overseas to a foreign country as a full-time missionary. So if that same ratio were applied to today, in America and all American colleges that we have today, that would be over 500,000 new Christians, or new missionaries would be signing up to go overseas. So I think back in that time, they had an understanding that this is just what we're called to do. It's not something that's just uniquely for just a few, reserved people or certain people. It's just really what we're called to do. And I reminded of what Paul said, we are all ambassadors, right? Not you should be an ambassador, but you are. You are an ambassador. And when you know who you are, you know what to do. When you know who you are, you know what to do. So I'm going to talk to you this morning just a little bit about God in our situation being this great protector. Remember yesterday we started out with the providence of God and how he possesses us, he owns us, how we surrender to him because he is in a much better place to direct our lives and our decisions than we are ourselves. And we were in Central African Republic, and we got out, as you heard yesterday, by these airplanes that came in and took us out. But that was just really the beginning of the journey. So we got into that plane, and it took us down into Zaire. But to get to Zaire, we stopped 2 or 3 places along the way, and we landed in these little bush villages to pick up Peace Corps workers, American Peace Corps workers, because remember the American government had told all the Americans to get out. And so we landed, and one place we didn't find anybody, they weren't there, so we took off again. Another place we landed, and we found one, and we picked her up, landed another place, there wasn't anybody there, we kept going. So we finally landed in Zaire, the neighboring country, which was when we received the phone call that said, you can't just wait it out, you have to come home back to the U.S. So we flew all the way back to the U.S. But getting back to the U.S. was interesting because we were in Zaire. We had no legal right to be in Zaire. We had no visa for Zaire. We couldn't leave from Zaire. We had to go back into Central African Republic where we were just taken out of. But this time, the city of Bangui, the capital city, had been completely taken over by French military. So they had come in and they had set up a base, they had completely surrounded the airport, and they had made it so that international flights could come and go to take people out. So these same MAF pilots flew us from Zaire back into the city of Bangui. And I think, so these pictures that I have here are representative of our time and kind of what happened. So this is just a picture of the military that were, just coming through the country, taking people's vehicles to get to the capital city of Bangui. And this is the Democratic Republic of Congo today. So that was, back in our day, what was known as Zaire. And the country right above it, that dark red, that's CAR. So we were up in that top little section up there where the red country is, and we flew down just over into the yellow part. And then we flew back up into Bangui, which is just over there to the left a little bit in the red section, and we landed in Bangui, and then in Bangui we were processed by American Marines. So this is very, very similar to what happened to us. We got off the plane, they led us to these tents where the American Marines were all set up. American Marines processed us, they took our passports, they took our names, they looked us up, they were talking to people on the radio and things, and the American Marines it was after all that we had kind of been through already, when we got to the American Marine tent, we just kind of like, whew, we felt safe for the first time in a long time. We felt like we were going to be okay. And they helped us out. They give the kids like these little, ration and meals, and the kids loved that, thought that was the coolest thing, and they were talking to them, and these Marines were all dressed up in, their guns slung over their shoulders and everything, and our kids were just like, wow, this is pretty intense. But then, to get us out of Bangui, there was no international flights going in and out. They were just military flights. So they had to put us onto a C-130. I think we have a picture of a C-130 here. So that's the plane that they loaded us onto. Anybody been on a C-130 before? Anybody been in the military? Yeah, a couple people have. And so these are monstrous planes. These are planes that the back opens up, and like Jeeps go up in there and whatnot. So we got on that plane, and it was just us and a couple other missionary families and a bunch of Marines sit on these, like, you know, kind of, they're not really chairs, they're just like netting that you kind of just have to sit on. And let me just tell you, it's the loudest airplane I have ever been in. It is extremely loud. In fact, the Marines even gave us these like earplugs to put in our ears, you know, which worked well for Beth and me, but for our little kids, they were way too big. So here's Beth trying to tear these earplugs in half to stick them in the kids' ears. The kids are screaming and crying. This is so loud. And then finally, one of the Marines whips out a military-grade, what do you call those things? Glow stick, a glow stick. He pops that, gives it to one of our kids, pops another one, gives it to our kids. Now our kids are like, wow, this is cool, preoccupied with something other than the noise, you know, and all of that. So that plane then took us, and we landed in the neighboring country. I guess I could go back to show you. Took us to the neighboring country of Cameroon. So Cameroon is the yellow country over there, or the orangey kind of yellow country. So we flew from the red way over to the middle part of that country, the capital city called Yaoundé. We got to Yaoundé, and I'm going to mix up a few things now for you to help you understand the sequence of all of this. But we got to Yaoundé, and the American government paid for that flight for us. We had to sign a paper that said we would reimburse the American government, which we never have had to do. But they also put us up in the Hilton Hotel in Yaoundé, Cameroon for the first night. Then after that, they told us, you are on your own. You have to figure out how you're going to get out of here and get back to the U.S. So we had to figure it out on our own with, you know, a bunch of other missionaries there trying to figure everything out. But now I go back. So back in Kembe, our little tiny village where we were, we would get our mail once every 3 to 6 months. That's how often we would get our mail, because the mail coming from the U.S. would come to Bangui, the capital city. And once it got to Bangui, there was no more distribution of mail anywhere in the country. So what would happen was the missionaries in Bangui, the capital city, had these mail bags, different color for every different mission station along that one road that went from Bangui all the way up to where we were. And as missionaries or maybe other business people or something was going down that road, we would give them the mail bags, they would carry the mail bags, and they would drop those mail bags off at each mission station. And it just depended on how often people would go, where we would get our mail 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. So this is about 6 months now before our evacuation. We're getting settled in Kembe, you know, the mission station's getting remodeled, we're really getting ready for a long-term ministry, and we get our mail bag. We open up our mailbag, and then there's a few letters, cards from family, and there's this white envelope in there that I think, that's strange. It's just a white envelope, nothing, no name on it or anything. I open it up, and in this envelope is a Visa card, a literal plastic Visa card. Now, you're thinking, what's the big deal? Well, it was a really weird thing because, number one, I had never ordered or asked for a Visa card. Number two, in Central African Republic, a Visa card was a non-thing. No one would even know what a Visa card was. Now remember, some of you here are young enough to not even remember a day where there was no internet, right, or email or cell phones. But this was back in 1996. This was pre-email, this was pre-internet, this is pre-cell phones, this is pre-all that stuff. So a Visa card in the middle of Africa, this is just really strange. I said to Beth, I said, what in the world would this, why would this have been sent to us? Where did this come from? And, you know, no idea. We decided, well, we'll put it in our, like, we had a little go bag that we would put, you know, all of our important papers in, passports, you know, anything else, checkbook if we had a checkbook, and checkbook, you guys know what those are, checkbooks? So we put the Visa in the go bag, right? Well, we totally forgot about it. Because you would never ever be able to even use that in Central African Republic. So we get to, now we fast forward, we're in Yaoundé, the capital city, right? We had landed there. Now we're kind of on our own now. We're just having to figure out how we're going to get out of Yaoundé back to the States. So we're there, and the people at the hotel, the Hilton Hotel, tell us, well, there is a travel agency not too far from here. You could get a taxi, you could go over there, and you could talk to them about buying tickets to get out. So back in that day, there was money had to be wired, which took days to get money from one place to another. It wasn't like just a transfer like that like you can do today. So we're staying in this hotel one night on the U.S. government. After that, we're on our own. We have to pay for everything. So I get to the travel agent with my wife and another missionary couple. There's 4 of us. We're there. We're talking to them about how we can, get out. We have no idea what we're going to do. We're just going to talk to them. And so we begin to talk to them about buying a ticket, how much it's going to cost, how can we do this. And all of a sudden, I remembered that in my go bag was a Visa card. And I thought, Cameroon is a little bit more of a developed nation compared to CAR. Maybe by some chance they would, So I thought I had, me of little faith. I just thought there's probably no way that that's going to work because number one, I never signed for it. I never called the number to activate it, none of that stuff. But as we're talking through the tickets and everything, she was beginning to ask, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. How are you going to pay for this? So I reached into my go bag. I pulled out my Visa card, and I just showed it to her. I said, would you by any chance take a Visa card? And she looked at it, and her eyes just got big, and she said, we take Visa cards. And I'm like, whew, okay, this is great. Visa, it's everywhere you want to be. And so I gave it to her. Now, back then, remember, it's not like, bing, bing, it's not, none of that going on, right? Back then, so some of you younger people may not even have known this, but there was a machine that you had to put the card in. Yeah, you know it. Put the card in, carbon copy, like that, go over the card, it reads the card, and then, that's just the beginning. Then they have to call somebody to make sure that this is legit, right? So she gets on the phone, she's talking, she's waiting. The whole time I'm just thinking, man, there's just no way this is ever going to happen. This is not going to work. So after about probably a good 10 to 15 minutes on the phone, she hangs up the phone and she looks over at me and she said, it's good. It went through. Your tickets have been purchased. And I'm like, what? Wow. So you see, here's the point. The point is that God knew way before we even had any idea what we would need. God was already in the process of providing it, of making sure that we had what we need. Now, it doesn't always work that way because the other missionary couple was there, and their visa, they had a Visa card too. It was totally rejected. They couldn't buy anything. So then I said, could I also pay for their ticket, which I couldn't because I didn't have enough credit. My credit was low enough that the tickets from my family was pretty much maxed out the credit card. But he provided for us in ways that we never dreamed possible. So then we get the ticket, right? And we have to then take a bus from the one city there in the middle of the yellow orangish country, Cameroon, all the way over to the coast on the water where it says, if you can read it, it says Douala. We had to take a bus to get to there to get out on an international flight that next night. So we did. We got on a nice big African bus that looks just like this one right here. We get on that bus, and it takes us to Douala, which was about a 5-hour trip. Now, this particular bus driver, this is exactly what it looked like right here. The road and the bus, we're on that bus, and this is a 5-hour drive. It's very hilly and very curvy. And this bus driver, we were sitting in the very back of the bus. So the very back of the bus was kind of like a little bit elevated, and there were 5 seats across the back of the bus, which was where we were. So we could see out the front of the bus very well. And this guy, this driver, I think he must have had a death wish, because he was going faster than any other vehicle on the road, and he was passing other cars and even other buses around corners, over hills. And I can distinctly remember sitting in that back row, looking out that window, thinking, Lord, you have preserved our life and saved us and protected us all through all this military evacuation, through the Civil War, through the military, the rebels, the guns, all that stuff. And we're going to get killed on this bus. We're going to die on this bus driving to this next city. And, well, fortunately, here I am. I didn't die, but it was close. I'm serious. There were many moments when we were going around corners when that bus would go like literally off the road a little bit, and another car coming would go off the road, and we'd bounce around and come back on the road. We get to Douala, the capital, not the capital city, but to Douala, the big city where we're going to get an international flight out. And the bus comes to a stop, and he says, "Ho, you in the back. This is where you get off to go to the airport." And I didn't mention, too, that this day it was raining. So it's not pouring down rain, but it's like a drizzly rain. And so he says, "You can get off right here." Well, we get off the bus. So we're my wife and me, 3 little kids, bunch of little handbags, and one big suitcase. Get off the bus takes off. Literally, I kid you not, we're standing on the side of this road, and all we can see is what you see right there, just bush. And I am beginning to panic just a little bit, thinking, what is going on? Where are we? What is happening? What is this guy doing to us? So I'm standing there, and in the rain, we're all getting wet. Our suitcases are all getting wet. And I look, and would you believe it? There is a man coming down the road, walking towards us in the rain. Now, I know enough to know about Africa that Africans don't usually walk in the rain because they get cold. 2, their clothes get wet, and they don't really have dryers or anywhere to dry their clothes. So they avoid walking in the rain, right? So here's this guy walking down the road in the rain. I'm like, that's an interesting thing. So I stopped him, and I said, "Hey, by the way," I said, do you know anything about the Douala International Airport? Do you know where that's at?" And he looks at me, and in French he goes, "Oh yeah, it's just right through those trees over there." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Would you be able to help us and maybe just kind of lead us that way? And could you even carry our suitcase for us?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, certainement, pas de problème." So he grabs the suitcase, puts it up on his head, and says, "Suis-moi, follow me." So we literally walk across that little road right there. We go down into this muddy ditch, up the other side of the muddy ditch, onto the grass, and we just begin to follow him. We probably walked for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and bang, there we were, right there. We came out of the bush, and that's what we saw, the Douala International Airport. There it was. And we walked in. I gave the guy some money. I thanked him profusely. I never saw him again. I don't know. I've thought it through the years. I thought maybe that was, could have been an angel. Who knows? Could have just been a guy walking down in the rain. I don't know. But we got to Douala. We got in there, and we were exhausted. We were wet. We were starving, and it was just, we were pretty much at our wits' end. So when we got there, we got on the plane, and we flew to Brussels, Belgium. And I can remember very distinctly when we got to Brussels, it was amazing, right? I mean, this big modern airport. I mean, there was food, there was restaurants. It was just pretty impressive for us, boondocksy missionaries. And we get there, and I said to Beth, I said, I'm going to go get some food at one of these restaurants because I'm really hungry. And she was hungry, kids were hungry. They were running around like crazy wild animals because they had been cooped up for so long, and they were so tired, right? So the tireder they get, you know how kids are? The more tired they get, the more wild they become, usually. So they're running crazy. I said to Beth, I got to go get some food. Beth says, honey, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can let you go and me stay with these kids. I'm just too tired. And I said, honey, I looked at her. So this is her part of the story, but I said, honey, I don't really think you have a choice right now. You don't really have a choice right now. You're going to have to just watch the kids while I go get some food. So I went and got some food. We get on the plane, we fly home. So that period of time, from the time that the MAF pilots came and got us in Kimbe to the time that we landed right here in Cleveland, Ohio, was a period of 5 full days. During that 5 days, we took off and landed 18 times, counting all the little flights in CAR, counting the flights back to Bangui, counting the C-130, counting every flight. We took off and landed 18 times in 9 different airfields or airports over the course of that 5 days. And when we got here, we just thought, wow, God, you have preserved our lives, and we are thankful. We give you glory. We give you praise. We are just so grateful that you not only protected us through all of that mayhem, but you also provided for us in ways that we never even dreamed possible. In Psalm 91, it says this: he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Here's what I want you to know about missionary service. I think what this verse means to me is that we may not understand God's sovereign protection because it's different for everybody. But I believe firmly that Psalm 91 means that we are basically indestructible until our work on earth is done. Until God is finished with us, we are indestructible. We don't have to be living in fear. We don't have to, be all anxious about what's going to happen. God is in control of our lives. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention, when we took off in that C-130 from Bangui to the neighboring orangey country up there, Yaoundé, Cameroon, that was reported, and rumor has it, but it was actually reported that as our C-130 was taken off, there were rebels in the bushes and farther out from the airport that were actually firing at our airplane as we were taken off. And all that, we didn't even know it, but at that time, God was just taking care of us. He was taking care of us. He was providing for us in ways that, we never even knew possible. But so God is the great protector. He's the great provider. You do not need to worry. You do not need to let those things keep you from pursuing missions, from pursuing God's will, from responding to the call that God has given to you. One last thing. I want to finish up with another, just a real quick illustration of God's provision. And there's missionaries that probably could stand up here for days and days on end and give you illustrations of this. But when Beth and I first started on deputation, this was a difficult time because we were excited about deputation. We were excited about getting to the mission field, but it was a time of leanness. It was pretty lean. So I was working a job. And we were finished with school. I was working a job. And I said to Beth one day, after we had started deputation, we had 2 supporting churches at that point. We had one church for $200 a month and a church for $100 a month. So we had $300 a month support coming in monthly. I said to Beth, I said, honey, if we're ever going to get our support, I'm going to have to stop working. I'm going to have to like completely dedicate my entire day to raising support, to calling pastors, visiting pastors, preparing letters, sermons, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to have to stop working. She was like, well, hon, how's that going to work for us? You know, we've only got $300 a month coming in. And I said, well, our rent is $300 a month. So we have the rent covered. All we got to do is come up with a little bit of money for utilities and food. You know, we can figure that out, right? Food. So I did. I stopped working. And we started out on full-time deputation, and I can remember like our second or third meeting after we had made that decision. We were on our way to a church, had a great service. The church was just really excited about joining us in ministry, even told us probably take you on, this was in October, probably take you on the beginning of the year. And we got in the car to return home. We were living in New York, so this is around Binghamton, New York. We were getting ready to return home, got about halfway home, and our car started making like this horrendously loud noise. We pulled off the road and we kind of drifted into a church, and happened to be a parsonage there. The pastor was there. He came out and greeted us. We told him what was going on. He actually lent us his car so that we could continue to drive on. But the car crankshaft had completely just, been all messed up, and it was finished. The car was done. So we just had to sell the car as was. I can't remember what it was, 15 or maybe $500, something like that. And so we had no car. We had no way to do our deputation. We had no way to go to all these churches, that we had set up for meetings. And I remember thinking back on that time, thinking, man, we're meeting up with some resistance here. It must be we're doing something that the devil doesn't want us to do here. And so we talked to some people. Actually, it was my parents. We talked to my parents, and they lend us some money so that we could go out and buy a car. And they lent us $5,280 exactly to buy the car, which included taxes and title and everything else. And it was a pretty nice Ford Taurus wagon that was going to service us probably for the whole time we were on deputation. So we get the car, we're back in business. About maybe a month later, within the same month as we get our monthly statements telling us what has come into our accounts and things like that. And I looked at the statement, and I was like, what in the world? I showed it to Beth, and I said, look at this. This is the first time this had happened to us on deputation. Some anonymous donor, and I know now it wasn't my parents because I've actually asked them, but it wasn't my parents. Some anonymous donor had sent in to our account a gift of $5,287. You remember what we paid for the car? $5,280. An anonymous donor sent in $5,287. I was like, okay, thank you, Lord. You are a great provider. I'm going to finish with just a little something just a little joke, okay? Just a little joke, and then we'll finish up. But I don't know if you ever heard about this little lady that was always would go out onto her porch, and she would just pray out loud to the Lord, thank the Lord for the day, thank the Lord for his provision, just always thanking the Lord. And she had an atheist neighbor over here. And the atheist neighbor was just annoyed at how she would be out there every day praying out loud, praising God, and just said, I'm going to fix this. And so one day she went out and she just was thanking the Lord for his provision. Thank you for the food that you give us every day. And so the atheist said, okay, I'm going to fix this. So the atheist goes out, he buys a few bags of groceries, and he runs over to her porch the next day because he knows she's going to come out. He puts all the groceries on her porch, and he runs and he hides behind the bushes. He's waiting. She comes out. She looks at the groceries. She says, oh, Lord, Thank you so much for providing for my needs. You are such a good God, such a great God. Meantime, the atheist jumps up out of the bushes and says, ha, ha, ha! He said, see that? That wasn't God that provided those groceries for you. I'm the one that went out and bought those groceries and put them on your porch. So see, there's no God. To which the lady said, Lord, thank you again for providing this food for me and for making the devil pay the bill. Yeah. So I don't want you to fear. I don't want you to fear. I don't want you to think that, you have to be anxious about God providing for your needs, God protecting you through the difficulties of life, because there are difficulties. There are some people who say that the safest place in all of the world is in the center of God's will. And I don't really espouse that view, honestly. I would substitute maybe a word and say the greatest place to be is in the center of God's will. The most wonderful, exciting place to be is in the center of God's will, but it's not always the safest. It can be very dangerous, especially overseas if you go to and think of some of those countries. Just an example, we had a man in our church in Cameroon that was saved, and I baptized him, and it was a great day. It was an amazing day because our baptisms were done out by a river, and the banks of the river are filled with people coming to watch, and we took him down into the river and we baptized him, and at the end of that we walked back to the church and we had a huge feast, and it was just a great and wonderful day. And at the end of that day, Joseph goes home. His family was pretty strong Catholic who had didn't oppose his conversion, but they opposed his baptism because he was baptized as a child. And in the African culture, if you baptize someone again, then that's like they're getting rebaptized, which basically puts shame on the family, saying that, no, that baptism as a child wasn't good enough. And you shame the family. So he got home that day. And was he in the center of God's will? Yeah. Following Christ and baptism is right in the center of God's will, right? Yes, he was. And when he got home that day, he texted me later that evening, and he said, my family has taken all of my meager earthly possessions, thrown them out into the front yard, and said that you are no longer part of our family. That's what happened. So, there are hard times. There are struggles and difficulties. But I'm just here as a witness to the glory of God to let you know that God is sovereign. He, in his providence, he is working in ways that we sometimes can't even understand. And that you can trust in him. You can lean into him and know that according to his perfect design and plan, he will protect you, he will provide for you, he will care for you, and you do not need to fear. Trust him. Serve him. Surrender to him. Go. Don't be afraid. Make a decision. Surrender and go. Give your life to him. You will not regret it. Don't be paralyzed by indecision. Follow his plan. His plan is that we go into all the world and preach the gospel. Let's pray. Father, again, thank you for the time together. Thank you for that we can testify to your goodness and greatness and your power. And thank you that we get to serve you, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the master of the harvest. Lord, there is a harvest. It's there. And you are just waiting for us to come and to begin harvesting, to pray to you that you yourself would send out more laborers into this great harvest field that exists all around the world. Pray for the rest of the time this morning that it would be beneficial and encouraging and inspiring and educational to each one here. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen.